Thank you for calling the Walt Disney Company. How may I assist you?
Hi, my name is Fernando Valencia, and I'm calling from Cusco, Peru, in South America. And I have a project that consists of dubbing a Disney film to a language that has never had a dubbed version. The language I'm referring to is Quechua, which is the second official language here in Peru. I know this is a random request, but I was wondering if you can please contact me with the right person, or maybe it's the legal department that I could approach first.
Yes, sir. I'll be happy to assist you, and I'll gladly connect you to our legal department. All right, I'm connecting you now. You have a magical day.
Welcome to the Global Ecological Cinema podcast from the Portland Eco Film Festival, where we share in-depth conversations about fascinating intersections of ecology, cinema, and filmmaking. Embracing the root definition of ecology, we explore what it means for humanity to have, hold, and transmit knowledge of planet Earth as our shared home through the power of cinema from around the living world.
My name is Fernando Valencia Saire. I'm from Cusco, Peru, in the Andes of South America. I have a boy who's Dylan. It's also in the movie.
My name is Augusto Zegarra. I am the director of RUNA SIMI and a Peruvian documentary filmmaker, and we're very excited to not only be part of this podcast, but have our film being part of the festival.
Augusto's heartwarming and beautifully crafted film, RUNA SIMI, which won the Audience Award for Best Feature at our 2026 festival, follows Fernando and his son Dylan through the fields, cities, and mountains of Peru. They are on a quest to dub the Disney film The Lion King into Quechua, Fernando's mother tongue, and the most spoken indigenous language in the Americas. If they are successful, it will become the first Disney film dubbed into Quechua, making the beloved classic accessible and more relevant to millions of Quechua speakers. I sat down with Fernando and Augusto to discuss the nuances of translation, linguistic ecology, media sovereignty, the gifts that indigenous languages, culture, and cinema offer life on Earth, and more. Fernando, I'd love to understand your translation philosophy a bit, and I thought that in order to do so, you could share how you approached translating the key phrase Hakuna Matata, which became Hakuchu Munaita in Quechua.
I think when I started the dubbing project, it started like kids playing a game, doing voices. But in the way I discovered that the dubbing, it's not only to translate it, it's to, I would say, transculturize the idea of a movie, and you have to interpret it for your people, for your environment, and for how the people think about something. And that's why when I crossed with the phrase of Hakuna Matata, which means no worries, it's like everything is all right, okay? I assume the commitment to create something different than Hakuna Matata, but not different at all. I wanted to make something that sounds very similar or even almost the same as Hakuna Matata. And it's like Haku. Haku means in Quechua, go, let's go. Hakuchu means let's go, but in a happy way. And then Munaita means let's make it beautiful. Let's make it in the art way. And it means let's go, not just go, and make it properly, make it good, and create beauty with our steps in our path.
Let's stay on this theme of translation, and I love the phrase that you use, transculturizing. For many, I think The Lion King is a story about individual heroism. But when you view Simba's journey through a Quechua lens, does the story take on a different meaning related to community or the return to one's roots?
Yeah, when I saw the first time The Lion King, I was passing a story very similar that Simba's story. I was alone in my house in the city of Cusco while my parents were working outside, and I was like a little Simba there watching the movie about a little Simba. So I think this is the same story as many people, I will say, in this time in the Andes. Most people migrate from the highlands, from the far communities into the cities, and of course they feel the loneliness. And I think the story of the Lion King is the story of many Quechua speakers that they have to go away from their home places and try to survive in the way they can do it.
Augusto, for me, your film links the sound of the Quechua language with images of the Andean landscape. Was it important to you to film the environment in such a way as to suggest that the Quechua language is a biological part of that ecosystem?
One of the objectives from the get-go was definitely trying to reflect the Quechua culture in many ways, so recording the mountains, the trees, the people, the crops, nature in general was also another way that we were going to try to do that, especially considering, for example, that the Quechuans, the way that they relate to the mountains, for example, they venerate them, right? They're also almost like deities, like the Apus, and that that's another thing that you get to see in the film. So we knew the environment and nature and the landscapes were going to be important.
Kay RUNA SIMI, RUNA SIMINCHIS. No kapaka kiking kausay ni paskamon hinaraj. Castilla simipiqa rimaytaqa rimanchis, atisqanchista rimakullanchik. Ichaqa RUNA SIMIpiqa sunqururuykimantapas rimasiawa hinaraj.
Among other things, linguistic ecology suggests that when an indigenous language dies, specific knowledge about how to care for and be at home with the land dies with it. Making this film, being in community with Fernando, Dylan, and their people, did you see evidence that speaking Quechua creates a different way of being at home together on planet Earth than speaking Spanish or English does?
100%, Rosa. To me, making this film, for the last 9 years, the biggest privilege to me of making the film has been to getting to know myself better. And I want to start by saying that I am not Quechuan. My mother is from Cusco, the same region where Fernando is from. And on my father's side, my family is also from the southern Andes part of Peru. So it is in my blood, in my family, but in my roots. But I've never been able to be so connected to it as by making this film. And I want to start by saying that because to me, I agree 100% with what the theory says, because when a language dies, a way to see the world and a cosmovision dies with it. And I've been able to confirm that firsthand by living and being in the space with Fernando and Dylan and his family and his community. And it's in everything, in the way that they have a dialogue with the Pachamama, with the earth, the way that they are so connected to it and then they understand. And I'm a city person, I grew up in Lima, I live in Lima, I work here. So I talk from my perspective of a person in the city that has a relationship with your territory, with the earth, and how you think, for example, of ownership of the earth. You're thinking of like renting an apartment, you're thinking of saving money and going into debt and dreaming of buying a piece of land for yourself, for your family. But that concept was so non-existent, I think. And just like the relationship of respect to the Pachamama and to the earth, I think is also related because you're always in contact with it. You understand the importance of it and you're thankful for it giving you food, working on, working on the crops and working on the food that's going to give it yourself. So as I was working on the film, I was trying to understand more of this.
As I was listening to you, I was thinking that another way to phrase that question would be, when an indigenous language thrives, does that knowledge of how to care for and be at home with the land thrive with it?
Definitely. There's another way to phrase that, another lens that we could see that the whole operation from, because to me, one of the biggest ways to relate indigenous languages to ecology as the majority of people know it, of looking after the environment, I hope that RUNA SIMI can start a conversation around that specifically, because to me it's very clear that the knowledge that indigenous people have, in particular Quechuan people that I've been able to live and see for myself, the knowledge that they have and the relationship they have with the earth, that is the key to the future relationships that we need to have to protect Earth better. I mean, it's very clear. And I think that different organizations around the world, for example, UNESCO, that have declared the indigenous language decade, they were going for the year of indigenous languages and they were like, no, this is too big. We're going to do a whole decade. I mean, of all the matters of all the things that you can worry for on Earth, to being able to focus on indigenous language, there's a strong reason for it. And I think it goes with the idea of the cosmovision in indigenous languages and indigenous people, that is the answer for how we should protect the earth moving forward.
Fernando, for those of us who don't speak Quechua, at the risk of asking you to express the unexpressible, can you please explain a little bit what emotional or spiritual connections to nature are possible in Quechua that feel difficult or even impossible to express in Spanish or English?
It's a big question. When you say Pachamama, you're talking about your mother, Earth. And I would say in a different wisdom, Mother Earth or our divinities in the Andes sounds like something religious, spiritual, but something very fancy, right? But when you think in the real meaning of the word mother, it's like our mother, it's like my mother. My mother, it's not something spiritual, it's not something fancy, it's just my mother. She's real. And I can imagine how much she loves me. And that's why I put my mother in a divinity level. That's what I do with my mother. And for us, Pachamama is the same thing. It's no something fancy. It's not something unreal. It's something that you can touch and you can feel by yourself, and how you can do not believe in something that you can feel with your human senses, right?
Mufasah kuskalyampas kawak
Mufasag mantak aswang aling mikani.
Kaka, so makalya kay ka.
Asinama kay ka. Mana mo na iman chupipas ayloy man tawanyunanta. Hinachu manachu simba.
Nyan chay takakong kaninya eskar.
Askan kawan cis, nyawin cis atis kanta, askaruan cis, kalpakas kamang.
They say that the cinema is where people go to dream together. And yet, RUNA SIMI reveals how many people are often excluded from this collective dreaming. Media sovereignty is concerned with reconnection in a way that strikes me as being very ecological. What does Fernando's struggle to make beloved films accessible to Quechua speakers reveal about media sovereignty, the right of a people to not just produce their own stories, but to consume the world's stories in their own language?
Sure, I think that festivals like yours and different film festivals around the world and film enthusiasts are also starting to promote a change in that. I think there's a lot of work to do collectively together to have a more leveled field on what gets exposed, because I am sure that indigenous people and indigenous cultures have a lot to say and to share of the world, and people should be ready to listen, because it's important to mention that Quechua, for example, is the most spoken indigenous language in all of the Americas. 10 million speakers, almost 4 of them in Peru. But even though it's the most spoken indigenous language in the Americas, a lot of people have no idea that it exists, So I think, to me, that says a lot about how we go on our everyday life, because at the end of the day, Quechuan people are being discriminated for who they are. That's it. They're just being discriminated for existing and for dreaming of existing in this world, talking their own language, living their own costumes and cultures. They're being discriminated just for existing. And you were talking before, Russell, I think, on the importance of cinema in creating bridge. And I love what you said about this phrase of collectively dreaming, because I had not heard this quote before, but I couldn't agree more. I think that Fernando gets asked the question a lot of why the Lion King? Why not a story of your own? And Fernando always answers, why not? Why can't we have this iconic film that everybody has seen? And to echo what you said before, cinema is a way to travel. It's a way to discover new places and dream of new places. So why not this little animated lion in the middle of the Sahara? So why not? So I think, like I said before, we still have a lot to do as a society and as a collective to try to make the field more leveled, more balanced on what stories get out there, what voices get listened to. And I want to emphasize too that we've never thought on our film side that we're giving Fernando a voice. Fernando always had a voice. Fernando had a very potent voice. What we're trying to do is we're trying to amplify that voice through telling this film and this story.
Also, I'll say the leaders wanted to keep the Quechua speakers in their places, right? While they will be in their places, they will not represent a struggle. I mean, for governments, for political status, there are many people in the big cities in Peru that they say, hey, the native language are beautiful, are the best, are nice, our culture, etc., etc. But once they meet a Quechua speaker, they say, no, 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 you are less than me, right? That's a social problem. It's not a linguistical problem. It's a social problem. And I think for many people, my work could turn into a menace because I am creating that dangerous bridge, right? And that's something that I I always think, but I am doing in the love way, in the right way to create that thing. This is why I'm pursuing rights from a big company because other ways I could do by myself, I can do anything because I am able to do. But I think one important thing to create the basement of that bridge, it's make the things on the right way. And that's what we are still fighting for it. And I think once this dream will be done, and I would love to use my remote control and my platform and change my favorite movie into Quechua because like we said before, Quechua is not only the language, it's the full package of the way of life that we have here in the Andes. It's a very natural language because you have very natural sounds like ah ah, right? Like kasui, yiki, right? So those sounds come from the nature, and you can easily relate the sound with what are you talking about. And I think it's important to reconnect with the nature, with our environment, and the native language are the most connected to the nature that we have right now. If you're in the city, in the big city, how you can connect with the nature, right? You only have some parks there, right? Planted parks with a lot of concrete. But when you go outside, when you connect with indigenous people, you can feel that real connection. When you realize that there is a real connection between you and your mother, you realize that it's so simple like this. You arrive to your home, you get home, and it's your mother with a delicious dish of something from the earth. That's what's the Mother Earth for us. And this whole stuff is in our language. I always say that Quechua and the stones, it's the most, how to say, durable thing that we have from our past.
Runa simi rimaqkunataqa saruchawaranchispuni, t'aqawaranchispuni ñawpaq mantaraq. Ñawpaqqa pakallapi runa simita rimakuqku. Kunanqa runa simita rimaqtiykiqa runaqa qawasunkimanmi manapas paykuna hinachu kawaq chinata. Chayrayku wakin runaqa
mananya rima pungkunyachu. Chayrayku taq chinkapuyta munasin.
One of the themes that comes up in many of the indigenous films we show at our festival is the intentional suppression of indigenous people all over the world. And I think it's really important to address that head on. When I consider why this oppression has happened for so long, I wonder if there's an anti-ecological reason related to something we talked about earlier. The fact that indigenous languages and cultures hold the keys to preserving the natural world, which runs contrary to what drives so much of government and industrial policy. Why does that suppression of indigenous culture and language exist? Is it bound up in extractivist policies that diminish and even threaten the circle of life?
It is very connected, because if they embraced more indigenous cultures and ways, they would also have to embrace collectivity. And Fernando was talking before about how this capitalist world in the cities make you think that you're an individual and you have to protect your own and your own family, but that's it. You don't think, at least in Peru, in the city where I live, you don't think in collectiveness. You don't think, not even in your building, not even in your neighborhood. And I haven't even thought of that, but there is a fear, I think, because if these indigenous ways of thinking and cosmovisions and ways to view the world that we've talked about before start gaining traction and more terrain, then consumption would go down, collectiveness would go up, and I think that the system at the end of the day, that's not good for it, So I think that is definitely a reality. And to what I said just a little bit before, the struggle is the same, So when I see efforts around the world in the Navajo, for example, dubbing a Star Wars film, or the Nahuatl trying to dub another film because they want to maintain their language and their worldview, yeah, people are in the same struggle. People are trying to resist how they can. So yeah, hopefully, like I said before, RUNA SIMI can serve as a starting point in that conversation,
Fernando, what are some of the films you would most like to dub into Quechua?
Babe, it's about love, it's about animals, it's about a farm, and I think most people in the countryside will feel happy to see something like that. Since I was a kid, most kids in the in the countryside wanted to be Rambo in their games. They wanted to be Rambo. I know many dogs called Rambo. There are many Rambos there. One of my favorites, and will be a challenge to me to dub, to interpretate, it's Star Wars. I will prefer the older ones. But Star Wars, to me, it's a very interesting thing to dub. It's something absolutely out of the Quechua environment. Yeah. So I think those are my movies.
That's a great list. I'm curious, how does one say, "May the Force be with you" in Quechua?
May the Force be with you. It's Kalpalla Kachun Kampa.
Augusto, please share some of your favorite ecological films as defined by you and why you love them.
I want to start by mentioning the film La Hija de la Laguna. It's a Peruvian documentary. It's made by a Peruvian filmmaker, a very talented Peruvian filmmaker, and it tells the story of a woman trying to protect a body of water in her own community and the struggles that she has fighting against the mining company that's trying to come into her community, which is, in Peru, is sadly, a very common fight. Another film that, to me, it does reflect the way indigenous people live here in Peru is called Huiñaypacha, which is a word in Quechua, like Fernando will not let me fail, which means eternity. And it's another film that actually Fernando has been able to dub. This film was made by Oscar Catacora, that to me was the most talented filmmaker Peru had. It's a beautiful film. It almost has no dialogue. Another film that is called When Two Worlds Collide, and it tells the story of a conflict between indigenous people and the government here. Another film that I hold close to my heart is a shout out to the editor of RUNA SIMI, actually, who was also the editor of the film, The Territorio, or Territorio. What is beautiful to me about that story and that film is that it was partially shot in the pandemic and they couldn't go back to shoot. So they had to tell the people in the community themselves to use the camera as a weapon to protect their territory. So I love the fact that there is so much footage and part of that film that is being constructed by indigenous people themselves. And another fifth film, just to move away from South America for a second. I want to do a shout out to a friend and a colleague called Paige Bethman that did this film called Remaining Native. It's a film that talks about the boarding schools and the boarding schools story in the US specifically. I think that it's important, to see these stories and to see the past and to understand the complexity of indigenous people living in the world right now, because that is tied to the idea of giving indigenous people what they rightfully should have, a more elevated voice in just the general ecosystem of things. And you will quickly see, I think, with that, how ecology, how we understand it, can be approached in a broader way and can be approached in a more efficient way.
Thank you both for being here, for sharing RUNA SIMI with us, and for all the good you do in the world.
And to you, Rosel, thank you so much for including us in this podcast. To us, it's an honor and a pleasure. I just want you to know that we are very aware of the moment that the U.S. is going through right now too, and it's impossible not to empathize, with the persecution that is happening right now, which is a very inhumane way to treat immigrants. And it's never a bad time to remind everyone that we're all immigrants.
Kalpala Kachun Kampa. May the force be with you. If you haven't seen RUNA SIMI, I hope you'll find the opportunity. If you have seen it, I hope you'll talk about it with your friends, family, and strangers. While you're at it, check out Fernando's Quechua clips online. When Two Worlds Collide, directed by Heidi Brandenburg, is available to rent at the world's best video store, Movie Madness, in Portland, Oregon. The other movies that Augusto referenced are listed in our show notes. RUNA SIMI won the Audience Award for Best Feature Film at our 2026 festival, which was sponsored by Cragg Law Center and Solve. We are a signature program of the Hollywood Theater, Portland, Oregon's premier modern historic movie palace. Learn more at portlandecofilmfest.org and hollywoodtheater.org. Our theme music is from the song Earth Worship by the amazing band Rubble Bucket. Our Global Ecological Cinema podcast is hosted, edited, and produced by me, Rosel Medina. Thanks for listening and for all the good you do in the world.
Into myself, yourself, myself, yourself, myself. I would like us to break up.